Welcome back to A Bite from the Money Sandwich, where we provide practical and easy to understand tips and ideas on how to manage your money better, so as to let you retire with comfort and on your own terms. When thinking about money and money management, it isn't always about your knowledge and expertise, but also the emotional element. A big aspect is the fear created if you don't get it right. So it is important to understand and break down these concerns. Today, I am joined by Natasha Janssens, who is the author of Wonder Woman's Guide to Money and an award-winning accountant, mortgage broker, ex-financial planner, and money coach for women. After arriving in Australia as an 18-year-old refugee without a family, Natasha learned firsthand the complexities of navigating the Australian financial system and the challenges faced by Australian women. With no knowledge or support network of her own, she set out to learn everything she could. Natasha speaks about what she has learned since coming to Australia and the stigma around women and money, and how we need to acknowledge and build confidence when it comes to managing our money. Well, welcome, Natasha. While I've known you for a few years now, I didn't quite realise you really are the self-made woman, because you arrived as a refugee at 18. Wow, that must have been an experience coming to a new country like Australia.
Yeah, it was. In many ways, I was fortunate that I really had to hit the ground running to sort of establish myself and figure out, okay, how am I now going to support myself and what am I going to do? So I had to focus on, as soon as I landed, finding where to stay and getting a job. So in many ways, I think that really saved me from a lot of the stress of what was going on back home, as far as watching the news every day and watching the bombing and all those sorts of things. If I wasn't kept busy, I think it would have really destroyed me, I think, emotionally from that point of view. So I had to come and, really get focused on getting established and, hit the ground running. And I don't think I've stopped since.
No, and really without that support, family and so on, you're a qualified accountant, you're a former financial advisor, a mortgage broker, certified money coach. I think if anyone is qualified enough to be a behavioural money coach now, would be you. What sort of drove you to learn about money?
Yeah, so growing up, so I grew up in the old Yugoslavia. Obviously there, poverty and economic crisis and war was a thing. I was born in Uganda, and we lived in Sri Lanka for a few years as well. So from a young age, I just saw a lot of really the impact that a lack of money can have on people and what it can do to people. And I saw growing up, my dad and family members, losing money to a bank, which was set up as something that you're supposed to be able to trust, and turned out to be a Ponzi scheme. Yeah. So I think already there, the seeds were being planted to just get me really curious and want to be as close to the source of information about money as possible. Because what I found was, if you're sort of at the mercy of the system, a lot of people pay the price. So I wanted to be as proactive as possible. And even from a young age, playing Monopoly, I was always the banker. So I think it was in my destiny that I was always going to end up in the world of finance somehow.
And from there, you've written a very successful book, and the Wonder Woman, which I think is a great title, Wonder Woman's Guide to Money. Tell us a bit about what motivated you to write, because I know it's a difficult process from personal experience, but what led you to actual writing a book?
So when I started my business, I was working a lot with mothers groups and women, and I found just that the time and the confidence to deal with money was a major obstacle. So I was focused always on figuring out, how do I get more women engaged? How do I make it simpler and easier for them to access the information without overwhelming them? So I used to do courses and webinars, and always there would be the excuse of, the schedule wasn't right. I'm busy today, I can't make it, and all of that. And I thought, okay, what's the next step? So the next step for me was a book. How do I condense that to make it something that's short and sweet that they can read quickly and make it really practical and applicable to them? So I went down that path.
Yeah, and providing low-cost solutions, and because your website and online courses, there's a whole gambit of services you provide. Was it important for you to try and provide a low-cost solution compared to the standard financial advice process, which we know, unfortunately, has become expensive?
Yes, definitely. So when I started my career as an accountant, I found that there were a lot of people who were really disengaged from their finances, who needed the support, but were just priced out of it. And I remember even in my 20s, having friends who were what we called the dinks, double income, no kids. They were high income earners, but still they couldn't access financial advice. It was either too expensive or they hadn't accumulated enough in savings for advisors to be able to support them. Now, a lot of that has changed over the years, but that was for me when I started thinking about the business and what are other ways that I can support people like that. As you and I know, the majority of the Australian population is priced out and can't access financial advice. A lot of people don't even understand how advisors can support them. And especially for young people as well, they sort of feel like that's not an area for them just yet. So looking at how do we break through that, how do we shift that stigma, and how do we get people to realize that actually it's not about how much money you have. No matter how much money you have, the more proactive you are and the more strategic you are with your money, the better able you will be to grow wealth. So that always motivated me to look at how do we change the system a bit and make it more accessible for more people.
Yes, and I think there's some really good points there in that it's not what you're doing is not anti-advice. It's maybe a stepping stone to sort of understanding money better and then realizing, well, okay, maybe now I do need help on product advice or strategic areas, but you need to get started, and providing that low-cost solution really helps.
Exactly. So every time when I was working in finance, when people found out what I did, the first comment they would make is, I don't have enough money to need an advisor or to get advice. And I found myself repeating the same thing, saying, if you have a source of income, then you need to be financially planning. You need to get financial advice. It doesn't matter how much you have. If there's any money coming in, you want to be strategic with what you're doing with it. And that's what it's meant to be about.
Yeah, well said. Now, as I said, the book Wonder Woman's Guide to Money. So you would have seen a lot of women over the years, and very smart, successful women. But when it comes to finances, it's sometimes a real struggle. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have to say, working in finance for a long time, I was, in a sense, oblivious to the challenges that women face. And it wasn't until I became a mum and started engaging more with mothers groups that it really opened my eyes to what the challenges are and what's sort of been taking place. So first of all, we know that women, we have a massive mental load. We're often the default parent. You're already there stretched trying to juggle work and career and kids and everything else that needs to be done at home. So something always has to give. So it's natural, even for men and women both, we will always prioritize what we need now over what we need tomorrow, right? So it's that sort of instant gratification. So it makes it really easy when you're busy to say, you know what, well, what's for dinner tonight is going to take priority. Then, thinking about my super or saving or long-term planning, okay, I can do that tomorrow. And we sort of end up kicking the can down the road. But when we start to peel the layers a little bit more, I found that there was more to it than just being busy. That busyness, in a sense, became sort of a plausible excuse for why we weren't looking after our money. And so when I started to peel through those layers, I found that for a lot of women, we feel a lot of stress and anxiety around money. Confidence is a word that's constantly popping up. I just don't feel confident. I'm not sure that I'll make the right decisions. And and that makes sense if we look at, the history of how long through generations women didn't have a say about money, and we were taught that money was men's business and we couldn't have a bank account and all those things. So all of those lessons were being passed from one generation to the next, that we just sort of fell into these default roles to say, well, my role as a woman is to look after the household and someone else will look after the money. So breaking through that mindset and helping women to build their confidence and realize that actually we make really great financial decisions. We make great financial planners because we're so analytical. I say to women, don't tell me that you get overwhelmed with picking an investment. Just think about planning a wedding or even attending a wedding and the things that women will think about and analyze without even realizing it. What's the dress code? What's the weather going to be like? Where's it going to be? How do we match up all these things together? We analyze so much, but because we're used to it. And suddenly when we talk about something that seems foreign, like investments, It's like, oh, well, I don't have the knowledge or the ability to do it. So getting them to realize that, you know what, it's the same thing. You just got to get used to thinking about it in a slightly different way, but you're more than capable of doing it.
Yeah, so, and I think it's kicking it down the road, that it's put in the too hard basket. I just think it's something, because you're not doing it every day or thinking about money, but really, as you just said, in so many other ways by default, you are really thinking about money, like planning a wedding or whatever the situation is. So because money is just all encompassing. It is strange. Because you're right, traditionally, and when we say traditionally, the last 100 so years, it was always, yes, it was men's business and not the women's, but really budgeting was always the women's side of it. And I've even just been told by my daughter, who loves ancient history, and in the Spartan times, men wouldn't be let near the money. It was always the women who controlled the money. So it is interesting how in society, it was really the last couple of 100 years, men have really, it's been that men look after the money, but really the household and budgeting, women really were doing by default anyway.
And that's the thing. So I found it interesting that there was some research recently that's sort of saying, women, for example, are now having more of a say in purchasing a home. But what I find consistent there is that budgeting or buying a home, it's still sort of attaching women to things around the home. And it ends up being that for men, it's the investing, it's the growth, it's that sort of more long-term aspect, whereas we're used to, looking after things that are more immediate, and the spending side of things and those sorts of decisions. So it's about, for me, it's been a lot about getting women comfortable with making those bigger and long-term decisions and the growth decisions, and not being fearful that they'll make a decision that will be so bad that, everything will fall apart. If I pick the wrong investment, that's it. It's end of days. If I pick the wrong super fund. And that perfectionism, I think, has a lot to do, again, with women's conditioning, because it was always about, you have to be the perfect wife. You have to have, the picture perfect home to show your guests. It was always that having to be perfect in so many ways. And I think that's translated in the way we think about money. We place that pressure on ourselves to have to make the perfect decision. So I'm always saying it doesn't have to be the perfect super fund. There is no such thing as the perfect super fund. But, pick a handful out of that, pick the one that you like and run with it. And then it'll be fine. So taking away that pressure that it has to be spot on.
I really like that. That's really insightful, because I do know so many men, and that's super fund, or that's someone, who cares? They'll do. Whereas, you're right. For women, they will be saying, no, I need to get this right. Whereas for men, it's, oh, well, if it works, it works. If it doesn't. So it's amazing how that thinking. So money is one of the other things I like talking about, is the IQ and the intelligence, or the EQ, the emotional side. I know there's something very close to you as well. Money is emotional. Money is about feelings. It's not just Excel spreadsheets of ones and zeros. It must be a lot where you talk to women and women and men about how money is an emotional thing, and you must understand that. And I know when you said about confidence was a word that was brought up, that all comes back to emotions, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And so most people make the not so much a mistake, but when they come to me, they think, look, I just need the right information or the right knowledge, and then everything can change. And it's a long sort of journey and lesson to get them to appreciate, when we say that money is emotional, just how serious we are about it, that emotion will trump logic every time. And we live in the age of information. You can Google anything, you can find out how to invest and what to do and all of that. And I had made the same mistake when I started my business. I thought if people knew better, they would do better. So I did webinars, I wrote a book, I was all about the money IQ. And then I found, even when people get the knowledge, they get financial advice, they get great advice, they're still not acting on it. And that really got me interested into, well, where's the inertia coming from? Why aren't we? Okay, you now have the knowledge, you know what you need to do. Why aren't you doing it? And that's that emotional aspect. So getting people to realize, and sometimes they have to experience it themselves, when we say, okay, well, here's the IQ part of it, off you go. But you'll come and see, if you haven't resolved the emotional aspect, you're still not going to go and follow through with that plan. So,
And it's really hard, because it's your own money. So, you do get emotional because it is your own money. You don't want to lose it. And I know I've taught and coached couples and mums and dads over the years. And really, I've sort of said, well, okay, every 10 or 12 years, you're going to see a share market drop. Your money is going to drop. But, the other 8 or 9, 10 years will be positive. So averaged out, you will do well. But still doesn't, when it comes to that year, and we're in that one of those years right now, the share market is down, and I will still get people coming and say, oh, should I move my money to cash? And it's really hard sometimes to tell someone, you just got to sit on your hands and you just got to just wait it out. History shows that the share market will rebound. But it's when it's your own money, it's hard, isn't it?
No, that's it. It's a lot easier to initiate those plans. Go, yeah. And we, as you say, at that time, we focus on the growth aspect of it. And as soon as things sort of start to move away a little bit, that fear factor sort of comes along, when really more people should be, potentially diving in more and snatching up some of the bargains that are around as well.
Yeah, I think I talk about having it as a New Year's sales, Boxing Day sale time. It was a really nice suit yesterday. It's a really nice suit today, but just because it's a sale time, it's 30% less. And sometimes, you look at a Westpac or a bank share or Telstra, it's dropped by 20 or 30%. It's still Telstra. It's still going to be there tomorrow. It's sale time. So, but it's very hard when it's your own money and it is invested to see it drop like that. So when you were one of the first I saw to actually look at alternatives to standard financial advice, what sort of experiences on your online courses? I know you do surveys, for example, of your people. So what are some of the things you find when you do that, when you reach out to your clients or your clients you coach?
So the most common thing that I find is that for most people and women in particular, it is about addressing that fear and the anxiety around money, wanting to have courage to do what it is that they want to do. So we'll often find that a lot of people will do this, not just women, that we will approach our financial goals from a place of like, what should I be doing? Or what do you think is possible? Like, based on my current situation, what do you think is possible for me? And I always say to my clients, don't pigeonhole yourself in that way, as far as letting the numbers determine what your future looks like, but instead focus on what is it that's important to you. What are you excited to achieve? What do you want your future to look like? And then turn it around and say, what do I need to do in order to achieve those numbers to enable me to do that? So, and again, letting go of that shoulds. What should I be doing based on my age? What should I be doing based on my situation? We often feel that it's that sort of pack mentality, that there's safety in numbers. Like, if I do what everyone else is doing, then I'll be safe. But I say to my clients that it really, when we think about our psychology and the way our instincts are wired, our money has evolved so much quicker than what our brains have had a chance to catch up. So a lot of what our instincts tell us to do isn't actually applicable when it comes to money. So if we think about, we just spoke about investing. So, that pack mentality, to succeed in investing, you want to buy low and sell high. You want to do the opposite of the crowd instead of following along and doing what everyone else is doing. If at the moment, if we live in a society where a lot of people might be overextending themselves and getting into debt. So just because your friends are upsizing their home when baby comes and all of that, that doesn't mean that that's what you should be doing. Rather, going back to your values and having a look at what is it that's important to you and prioritizing that. I know when we, same sort of thing, it's very hard to resist some of that societal pressure, but it's really important that we do. When we had kids, every time, people would come around and the very first question everyone would ask was, so when are you getting a bigger place? So, well, right. We're fine with the babies. Oh, but, when the kids are older, they'll want their separate space. Well, that's 15 years away. Do we really need to be upsizing now while we're paying for childcare fees and working part-time? Yeah. Maybe not. So, so to bring it back to your question, so for most people, it's finding that courage, I think, to go against the grain and to actually be true to themselves and pursue the goals that they want to be pursuing rather than what society might expect them to do.
Yeah, and it doesn't help when newspapers or media are put, the share market's crashing, everyone should get out type of thing. It's just, it's just emotional and it sells newspapers, but it's not actually usually the right thing. And so to go further down into the fear and anxiety side of it, because I definitely, so many people I've met over the years, it's exactly the same experience. Do you have sort of, through your online courses or just through in your book, to how to have exercises to get over that side of it? Or is it like when you're saying you're focusing on your goals or focusing on the positives, do you have techniques or have learned things over the years to help you with that with your clients?
Yeah, so I find that we'll often go down the rabbit hole without realizing it, and we'll instinctively, I don't know if it's even a word, but we'll catastrophize things, make things a lot worse than what they potentially might be. So a good exercise to do is to, first of all, I like to do a brain dump or whatever it is that's going through my mind and what I'm afraid of, and to actually see that through to the very end. So I'm afraid if I make this decision, let's pick super as an example. If I pick the wrong super fund and if I pick the wrong investments, then I will lose all my money. I will end up broke. I will end up homeless and I'll be out on the streets with no support. Right. And then as you start to break that down to go, okay, now how likely is that to happen? First of all, who do I have around me to support me? Okay, so I'm not really going to be out on the streets because I've got friends and family members and all these other options there. Okay, so that bit isn't quite true. How likely is it that I'm going to pick like a super fund that's going to send me absolutely completely broke? If we have a look at all the research about the super funds in Australia and how, most of them, do quite well. Yeah. Okay, so that's really unlikely. How likely is it? And just going down that path and then going, okay, so that's one possible example. But what is it that I would like to happen? And then looking at what is most likely to happen. So it's the same sort of thing. If I apply for a job, I won't get it, and then there'll be this negative consequence and that negative consequence, and we go down that path. So again, circuit breaking that and saying, okay, well, that's one possibility. Is it likely to happen? No. What else might be happening instead? And if there are things that I think are likely to happen, how can I use this fear to protect myself? To say, okay, so some of these rings are possible, some of these risks are possible. What can I do to reduce that risk? What can I do to protect myself? So if there is a risk that I'll pick a really dud fund or a really bad investment, well, I can protect myself by doing some extra research, doing some extra due diligence, getting some professional advice, and then I'll reduce the risk of that happening to me. So a few of those strategies I find tend to help with just focusing our mind back to the present and what is within our control.
Oh, well said. I think it's also really important that, what is that fear about money? Because money just incents, it's just amazing how much when you sort of say, I want money, but I don't quite sure how to get it. But when you sort of, as you said, doing the same process, break that down. Well, why do you want money? Is it to go on holidays? Is it for security? You need to keep breaking it down and you really see, okay, for some reason, I was poor when I grew up. I always wanted, with no money in the bank account. I just want that security, having money in the bank account. Okay, now we can at least address that and look at that fear and break it down exactly as you said. One of the things you were also saying about money was, well, if you do have a fear that could be recognized, and I presume sort of divorce would fall under that. So yes, you've gone through a really upheaval, and you're now on your own. And even if you have been left with assets and this, it's the fear of, well, I don't want to blow it, or I'm now on my own and I've never had to do this in the past. I'm sure you would have had examples of that, of people you've met.
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing to recognize is that we will naturally already have a really strong fear response around money because it's that survival instinct, and money is how we get food and shelter. So it's closely linked to our ability to survive. Pardon me. But it's then about going and recognizing that and then just breaking through some of those added layers of fear that we've identified. So if I'm putting pressure on myself, if I'm fearful that I will blow it all, where is this story coming from? Where is the evidence that says, have I made such bad decisions in the past? Or is this, something that I've imagined about myself, because we quite often as kids will carry these stories and self-perceptions about who we are and what we're capable of, especially around money. And if we leave those stories unchecked and don't look at what the origin of it was, that then follows us into adulthood and really comes to the fore when we are feeling financially stressed or something unexpected happens, like divorce. So it's worthwhile going back through your money history, through your personal stories and memories and life experiences, to have a look at what has been the pattern for you around money and how you can often reframe that and shift that pattern, because that then sets the foundation for building your confidence that you will be able to make good decisions. Because that fear that I'll make the wrong call can really paralyze you, because even if you go and get advice, you might think that that's the way to step outside of that fear. But the fear is still that you make the wrong decision. So you'll go and get advice, and the fear will be, well, what if I ask the wrong person for advice? And therefore, so that fear will always follow you around. Same sort of thing with that needing money for safety. We'll often think, well, okay, what will make me feel safe? Is it 50,000 cash in the bank? Is it 100,000 cash in the bank? But again, it's just a symbolism around that amount, because we'll get attached to that amount. And then later it'll be, well, I'm fearful if it drops below 100,000. Like, I can't let that amount, I can't touch that money. It's there for an emergency, but I can't touch that money because I'm fearful of what might happen if it drops. So again, it seems to us logically that we'll resolve that fear if we achieve a particular goal, like certain amounts of savings in the bank. That can help to some extent, but it's really important to, as you say, go back and dig through what's the significance about it and where is that fear really originating from, so that you can start to release those blocks.
And how much would it be that you've now recognized this fear and getting some understanding of that, well, okay, I now need accountability in my life, because as you said, I recognize it, but I still need to make that first step. And even if I make that first step and getting some advice or going, reading your book and seeing what I need to do, well, who's going to be there 6 months from now, a year from now, to make sure I'm staying on track? I'm a great believer in having, coaches or people who keep you accountable and on track to reach any goal. Is that what you found, or your experience?
Yeah, and look, for a lot of it as well, it's just with actually supporting people with putting that knowledge into action. So because we're creatures of habit, that it's that instinctual response that when something happens, I'm going to respond to it in that way. And it takes the support of a coach to get you to unlearn that behavior and learn a new way of responding. Otherwise, it becomes really hard to break that pattern as well. So there's the element of accountability, as you say, as you're going through, but also just that moral support as well to help you to build that confidence and break through the fear is really important too.
Yeah, I think, you've said it so well about the confidence side. If you can just get confident in anything in life, but especially around money, it's so important. Natasha, it's been actually wonderful to have you here. I've got a stack of other questions, but also don't want to keep you. The one question I always love to ask any guest on the show is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received? So what would be yours?
Oh, it's such a hard one. I was thinking about this because there've been so many great mentors over the years. But if I think the consistent theme from all of them has been to invest in yourself. So not just investing financially, but continuing to invest in my knowledge and my personal growth and in my business. So really adapting. I know these days it's a bit of a buzzword, but that growth mindset to sort of go, don't just stay where you are, but continue to invest in your growth and in your learning journey. And that's sort of where that expansion and that wealth and abundance comes from as well.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Education should be a lifelong journey. Natasha, it's been great to have you on the show, and just thank you so much for all your insights. And hopefully we can get you back on again soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Okay, bye-bye. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to know more about Natasha Janssens, visit womenwithsense.com.au. Women with Sense is an online platform dedicated to empowering Australian women about the way they think about money and their finances. Also, feel free to either email me on admin@themoneysandwich.com or visit our own website, themoneysandwich.com, if you have any questions or want to learn more. Visit my website, themoneysandwich.com, for free templates, online calculators, and subscribe to our newsletter to help you now for a better retirement tomorrow. As with every podcast, this information is not advice, as not personalised to your own situation. And past performance is never guaranteed for the future. What we are trying to do here is to provide tips, coaching, and education to help improve your money knowledge, which we believe can only be a good thing. See you next time when we take another bite from the Money Sandwich.